today and I'll go to school tomorrow. First impressions are incredibly important.
Honey, you can make a wonderful first impression.
Brenda, how could you?
He was a jerk, okay?
I've made my choice and I choose me.
North South Connection podcast listeners, welcome back to 90210 NOSA with Beverly Hills 90210 podcast retrospective series. I am JT, and joining me as always on this journey is my partner Tim Capel. Tim, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, JT. Trucking along here.
You ready to play some hoops tonight?
I guess so. You know, I'm not a big sports guy, but this episode it goes much deeper than just what happens on the court, as we'll see, and as we'll get into with our very special guest on this episode.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It was a little tough watching this one with all the pickup basketball and everything else because it's fresh off me suffering a very severe injury playing basketball. So,
I didn't think of that. Yeah.
It was a little rough when I fired it up today. I was like, come on. You can't make it up.
Yeah.
Timing it was brutal. But anyway, I'm here. And if you're new to the show, Tim and I are your hosts, and we rotate in a third guest every episode. We're going chronologically through the show. We'll talk about it. We'll go through some notes, and then we get some awards at the end, and then we'll kind of give our thoughts on the state of the show as we wrap up. But we have a debut guest tonight. He is our good friend. I just saw him in person actually not that long ago. He is a frequent podcast flyer on many of our sister feeds, and he is James Gruenberg. James, how you doing?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great, my friend. Not really, but trying.
Yeah.
So, James, like we usually do with our guests, I'd like you to take just 2 minutes of our time and tell us how you discovered the show, when you became a fan, and your relationship with Beverly Hills 90210.
Well, it was on one of our weekend chats, and instead of watching wrestling like we normally do, we decided to watch Beverly Hills 90210, and we caught the last of season 5 actually. And then me and Tim and one of our other buddies, Eric, we stayed up and watched a couple of more episodes. So then I was like, okay, let me go back from the beginning. And then from then on, I was just hooked on it.
So to give everyone a frame of reference, like this was like a month and a half ago, right? Because I think it was on that same call, Tim, where we kind of decided to do this, was that night, because it was one of our favorite episodes. It was the Palm Springs toward the end of season 5. And we kind of got fired up watching it, and that gave me the feel to finally do this and bring you along for the ride. So that was a big night for all of us as far as 90210 content.
It really was very formative in the development of this show.
Yeah, and then you brought someone else into it. You know, you brought like a new person to watch the series from the beginning, and I've been hooked ever since.
And now you're significantly younger than Tim and I, right?
Yeah.
How old?
I am 29 right now.
Oh my God, just a number.
I wasn't even born when the show came out.
So that's good though, because we haven't really had that frame of reference yet, Tim, on the show. But everyone who's been on so far watched it in some form, when it was originally on. So
right, and it just goes to show we don't discriminate when it comes to our guests on the show, right? You do not need a PhD in 90210 history.
No, like we said, I mean, it is an open casting call. So anyone who's listening and wants to be on, just reach out to us on social media, and you have a spot. Where the schedule is filling up. I'm not saying it'll be relatively soon, but you have a spot. We still have some season 1 episodes left to fill. So, all right. So we're going to roll on here then. Gruny, good to have you with us, of course. And we're going to go dive in. So tonight we're talking season 1, episode 5, One-on-One. First debuted November 1st, 1990. So why don't we dig right in? We get a hard-hitting montage with Brandon and Jim, almost kind of picked up where they left off last episode, right, Tim? I mean, we ended last episode with them kind of having the birds and the bees chat on the basketball court, and then we picked
that
back
is
up.
True.
Yeah, they're shooting hoops again.
Yeah, it's weird. There's a part of me that thinks maybe you could have run this episode a little bit earlier, and certainly earlier than the Brandon getting it wet for the first time. But yeah, it does have a sort of nice symmetry with the ending of that last episode.
I think we needed Brandon losing the V card first because it gives him the swagger to try out for this team later. So
to have the confrontation with one of his potential teammates that we'll see later in the episode.
Jim is like full Al Bundy here, just bragging on his high school heroics, and he's it's a new side of Jim that we're seeing, a little stage dad. Thinks Brandon can make the starting five. He's got what it takes. He's going to keep working. So Jim's all in on Brandon's fledgling hoops career. Rooney, what'd you think of this start? Did you get you a little fired up for the episode?
Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing like the inner sports dad of Jim coming out, and from what you guys said, I find it interesting. It's like we go from Brandon's first time to making the basketball team. I was like, I feel like it's kind of out of order. It's like maybe you should go for the basketball team before getting it in, but that's just my opinion,
You think so?
I feel like you need like your soft like high school stories first before you get into like the harder like.
No pun intended with the hard, soft and hard.
Yeah.
All right. Bringing the heat. All right, so we didn't get to Brenda. She's thirsty today because she wants her own car, and Cindy's giving her all kinds of shit about it. And she's kind of giving a shit about driver's ed actually, and her struggles with it. She's like, okay, yeah, you just have to pass the test. Like good luck. And we're seeing some more Cindy's gardening as well. She's got all the plants in the house, so that's kind of carrying over from one of our recent episodes as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Cindy, the horticulturist here in this episode, we're still trying to sort of find a hook for her, I think. Jim, it seems like they're kind of figuring out now, especially his, somewhat over-involvement in Brandon's extracurricular activities here. I don't know. Jim definitely has a favorite child, and it is not Brenda.
Well, I think I'm not going to say favorite yet. I'm going to say he projects his youth onto Brandon, but I think he's a super protective of Brenda. Like it's his little girl, right? So I think it's more that than like that he doesn't like her or that Brandon's a favorite. I think he's just they've quickly pivoted to Jim being like an alpha dog, which he really wasn't those first couple, but they've kind of pivoted to that now where they're at least they're playing it up. We'll find out later. It's not 100% the case, but kind of a stud maybe in high school and a successful businessman and wants his son to get laid. Like they're kind of playing it up, right? Kind of like a man's man now, which wasn't the initial positioning of him.
Yeah, he's awfully invested in this throughout the episode.
He is. So we go to the school, and Brenda sees her friends and says, "Bye, E," and Brandon can't handle that. And Andrea steps in and says, "That's it. She's full Beverly Hills now." And then we get a savage Andrea line here. So Brandon, she's basically like, "Are you going to cover the tryouts?" Which seems like an odd story. I guess sports section, but is he going to cover the big basketball hoops tryouts? And he says, "No, I'm going to try out for the team." And Andrea says, "Aren't you a little short for basketball?" And then Steve shows up, and he gives him the same line. So was this like a Jason Priestley short joke? Was that like a thing?
It must have been. And it's one of those things you don't really want to, like, they didn't really tend to point that out with these kind of, especially with in a leading man role like Jason Priestley is supposed to be here. So that was kind of ballsy a little bit.
What did you think, Rooney, of the savage attack by Andrea and Steve here?
Well, I mean, Brandon's just going to have to prove that he belongs out there. I mean, if there's one thing that Muggsy Bogues has taught us is that height doesn't really matter in basketball.
Sure. He taught it right around the same time. So I guess there's some inspiration for Brando.
Yeah.
All right. So we get this next scene kind of actually was maybe my least favorite of the episode. It initially kind of turned me off on where we were headed with this, and then before picking back up. But we get Brenda daydreaming in class of being a NASCAR driver. So she's like in a race car driving and kind of talking to herself. I thought this felt like a little too sitcom-y, Grooney. I don't know. What do you think? Like it felt a little hokey.
I thought it was a little too comical for a high schooler's like
Yeah.
daydream. I mean, you could like daydream about like owning a nice car, but it's like, what does NASCAR have to do with passing your driver's license test?
I guess thinking she's like an expert driver. It just kind of stuck out. Like a daydream of maybe her like cruising through Beverly Hills in her car would have been better than like.
Oh yeah, that's what I was
This
saying.
just felt
Yeah.
more like
It's like
I don't
middle
know.
school.
Yeah, it was weird. What do you think, Tim?
It's like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a NASCAR driver.
Yeah, this is almost in some ways a very 90s moment, not within the framework of the show itself, just in terms of the approach to the storytelling, where it's very much just a time killing exercise. It's just thrown out there because they have so many episodes to do per season, and they'll just take any opportunity that they can get to just do a real time wasting sort of scene. So you would see things like dream sequences, and I mean, this isn't even a dream; it's a daydream, right? That she's some kind of weird fantasy she's having in class that, I mean, serves absolutely no purpose. I mean, it just goes on too long. But it's just something you see in these very early 90s shows.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I thought it was pretty dumb, too.
Did you guys daydream in high school?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying it's an unrealistic daydream. I guess it could have been. It just felt odd here. It wasn't something they usually do on the show, at least at this point. Like, it just looked hokey and felt hokey. Like, I don't know.
I wonder how much more we're going to see this type of trope, especially in these early years. One to keep an eye out for.
So we do find out that Brenda failed her driver's training 3 times already in Minnesota. And so we're kind of getting all about the challenges this week, right? We got Brenda kind of overcoming this and Brandon trying to make the team. So then we head to tryouts where it's, Tim, you and I have been big Steve Sanders guys in the show so far. This was not a primo episode for Steve.
No.
He got exposed a bit here. We'll see some stuff later, but here he gets worked on the court. Like he is, he talks himself up. He tells Brandon, look, the coach all but guaranteed me. I started on JV. And then he goes out there and just gets fucking eviscerated on the court. Like he can't even stand up to these guys. He gets crossed over. He trips. Like he's just gets completely emasculated. And he basically, it knows it. Like you can tell he's pissed off. So then Brandon comes out. He finally gets the call. And of course, he's a stud point guard. He's crushing it. He's, weaving and bobbing, making passes, getting rebounds. So we find out a minute later that he survives the first cut, and Steve did not. So Steve gets cut right away, and he basically, projects it out on Brandon for a minute and says like, "Well, you got no shot. Sorry." Mm-hmm. But then he pivots a little bit because at first I was ready to say, "Well, what the fuck, like, shitty friend, right?" Like basically saying you have no fucking chance. But then he pivots and says it's not because Brandon's not good. It's because all these players on the team don't even live in the district, and it's all a friggin' scam. And he's pissed. These guys are outsiders. It's a free ride. They don't belong here. It's our school. Like he's going right into all that, right? And he's not coming out saying racist stuff, but he's basically implying, right, that they're a bunch of minorities and they're only here because they're good at basketball and they don't belong in our school, right? So and because of that, it's almost like a little affirmative action type thing, right? He's like, because of that, this program that the school's created that the students don't even friggin' participate in, really, I'm not going to make this team.
He's being very like dog whistly here, where he's not saying what he really means, but it's quite obvious, and it's not a good look for Steve, is it? He's because at the end of the day, he is just making excuses for his own poor performance on the court. He absolutely got shown up. Should have gotten cut as he did.
Yeah, I almost thought they should have had him do better if they really wanted the story to resonate. Yeah. Like he should have been, if he would have performed well and it got cut, then he's valid. But I think what they're trying to do, I guess, is, as we'll see, not give validity to his story. Like at first it feels like there's validity to the story, and then we'll see where it goes. But if there was going to be validity, you need to have him do better than just getting fucking embarrassed out there.
It turns out, well, as we're going to discover, this really is sort of a meritocracy, and Steve really sucked, and Brandon was a little bit better. I don't know how much of that is down to the characters versus the actors playing them. Like maybe Jason Priestley is short white guy, sure, but still maybe a little bit better on the court than Ian Ziering. I don't know. But Brandon makes it past that first round, and Steve is just, oh, it's just a formality. You're still going to get caught. And I mean, Brandon, as we're going to see, well, he's not going to have much of a high school basketball career, is he?
What'd you think, Rooney? What'd you think of Steve's assertions here?
Well, first off, yes, Steve definitely got owned in basketball tryouts and rightfully deserved to get cut. I mean, Brandon crossed him up and stole the ball from him, and Steve just like, what's wrong with me? And, without saying what he really means, Steve really does sneak in, all these like blatant racist lines, like, oh, well, they're only here because they play basketball. It's like what you said, like, oh, they're only here for a free ride. They don't even live in the district. So like Steve's just throwing out the excuses for his poor performance, but he's not really like saying what's really on his mind.
Yep. He's hinting at it for sure. And Brandon kind of gives a look like he kind of knows where he's headed, but.
Mm-hmm. But he chooses to ignore it. Like Brandon doesn't, like, Brandon's often like La La Land, like, oh, that's not true.
Right.
He does. He plays a little bit dumb here. Oh, yeah. I'm new in town, Steve. I don't know the score.
Yeah. And we'll see, like, you'll hear what he says, like, what he said back, like, when he was like, oh, well, back in Minnesota, we didn't have this. So, as we get into more of the episode.
All right. So, and also I think Brandon was a little offended probably too. So, like, that's probably why he didn't want to hear it, right? Is Steve kind of shitting on his chances. All right, so we go to the Peach Pit. So we just, of course, were introduced to that recently, and it's still got the weird outside. We don't have the official kind of Peach Pit we all know and love, but the inside is kind of there, not fully, but it's kind of there. And then so he talks to Nav for a second, and then he's going to leave, and he sees James and a couple of the other basketball players, the guys that Steve was referencing, starting to leave, and Brandon's kind of like, hey, good seeing you out there, whatever. And James like, yeah, all right, buddy. And then did you guys notice the odd overdub here? Like they start to leave and then you hear James say he's got no chance of making the team, but
yes.
it wasn't clear, like clean. Like it's like they forgot to do it and then they added it in or something.
They
like,
added it in post.
It's too loud for what they were trying to get across. It was just really awkward.
There's a lot of that in this episode, I felt like.
Yeah, it almost seemed like a voiceover, like, the dude just, like, maybe, like, the actor, like, screwed up his line, and then the guy was like, all right, just go in here, re-record it, and we'll just play it in. But it's like, yeah, it's way too loud for it to be, like, a whispering voice.
Right.
Really hits you over the head with it, yeah.
Yeah, it's like maybe in the original taping, like, he didn't say it loud enough or something, and it just feels out of place. All right, so we got Kelly and Brenda talking. Kelly's hooking up a limo. Did she say they were going to Janet Jackson concert? That's what it sounded like she said.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it later though, when she's where she is. But anyway, so she's get all that, and we're kind of getting initial her trying to talk Brenda into something. Like we'll see it again later. Brenda's kind of like, we'll see. And then we see Kelly kind of scoping out Brandon. So Tim, this is something we picked up on earlier in an episode on both sides, Brandon and Kelly. A little bit of feelings here. So Brandon's kind of doing the classic teenage pretending to be an NBA star in his room, shooting a sock into a hoop.
Yep.
And Kelly goes in the bathroom and she kind of peeks in and kind of giving him the eyes, and they kind of have a moment there.
Talk about the eyes. I actually took this back as early as it was right after the dinner scene. Kelly was there with the Walshes for dinner, and later on she's like on the phone in the kitchen. Brandon walks in and he gives her the most fuck me eyes I have ever seen of any character on this show so far. And it's like, whoa. And then of course, he's doing the thing in his room. She's sort of spying on him and flirts with him a little bit. And it's like, man, who knew that started this early?
Nice shot there, champ.
Yeah, they're definitely feeling each other, because we did see that too. Like I said with Brandon early. Was it the first episode where he was kind of digging on her? Right. So, all right, we'll see where it goes. All right, so we go back to school, and this is one of my favorite running gags. Is Steve, and it looks like it's the same scene every time. Steve is walking, and David comes up from behind. I feel like he's always in the same spot, and he's like, "Hey, Steve, how you been?" And this has kind of been the David comic relief role that he's been so good at, Tim. I know last episode with Drew, we really kind of hyped this up, but he's funny here because he's like, hey, have you missed me? I've been out with the flu for a week. And he's like, but he gives these fucking details that are so funny. Like, he explains the whole way he recovered, and I had all these fluids and this and that. And Steve's just like, look, I don't fucking give a shit. And he just walks away. And Dave's like, I'll see you later. And then he goes on to the next guy. He's like, hey, whatever, Terry, how you doing? So it's just, again, I like how every episode David catches Steve like in the same spot. It's always walking between classes. He catches him.
I like the suggestion that David is maybe staking his claim with different jocks. Like, maybe he struck out a little bit with Steve, so he's gonna bark up a different tree now with this other character who's not really a character in the show. It's just he's gonna try at any cost, right?
Yeah, and he's just trying to find any of these groups, even if he doesn't. I don't think he realizes he struck out at Steve. I think he's just taking as many hacks at the ball as he can.
He wants to have a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah. He's an aggressive. We've seen it. David's aggressively trying to climb the social ladder and get invited to the big party.
Were you an aggressive social climber, Gurney?
Still is. How do you think I saw her? How do you think he came to my house?
It's funny that you asked that, yeah, because I would say I'm kind of like David in a way, because I want it to be like socially acceptable, and it's like, if I don't get it socially acceptable in one person with one group, I'll try the other person to see if they'll accept me. It's like, if one says no, maybe like the 9th guy out of 10 will say yeah. So it's like 1 out of 10 will let me in, then the other 9 will accept me,
There you go.
Are you enjoying the David Steve stuff, Grinny, and you're watching?
I think it's kind of funny that it's like, oh, hey Steve, here's just like David, like the fly on the wall, and then Steve's like, shoot fly, don't bother me. So I do think they're good, like, it's a good comic relief. It's like, here's Steve just thinking he's all that, but then he's got like I don't know if you call David the nerd, but he's like just a social outcast, like, following him, be like, oh, hey Steve, man, did you catch that game last night, bro? It's like, dude, I don't care, man. I'm gonna just go to class. So yeah, I do find it funny. And
for Steve, it's almost self-inflicted because he fucked up the silvers in that first episode, and now he's stuck with them because he picked the wrong one by accident.
Yeah.
Exactly. And David did do him the solid by driving him home, even though he fucked up his car later.
Yeah, that's like Steve's fault. Like, Steve got himself into this.
So we get more now, a little bit more direct racism from Steve. So he runs into Brandon and he's like, hey, sorry, I went to the Laker game last night. I was going to call you, but I ran out of time. It was last second. And they were playing the Celtics, and Steve starts gushing over Bird and McHale. And, Brandon's kind of like, wait a minute, I thought you were a big Lakers fan. He's like, I am, until the Celtics show up. Us Irish guys got to stick together. And Brandon's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And Steve's basically saying, like, these black guys are okay now, but when the Irish come in, like, we gotta stand tall and can't let them take over the league. Which is basically what he said. And so
yeah,
I feel like I don't know. Like, I know they're gonna try and show growth for Steve, and Steve and Kelly right now is supposed to be like the representation of Beverly Hills, like, with a heart, though, like, with the potential for change. So I guess it's okay that it's him, but this would have felt better if it was like Steve's friend or something.
Right.
Yeah. Like Steve and some guy are hanging out, and Steve's kind of hedging, like, and the guy's like, yeah, like, we had a root for Bird, right, Steve? Like, it would have felt like a little, like, it just felt like a darker turn for Steve than, like, I wanted, because he's been so good. But again, I think they're trying to showcase in him and Kelly almost like the bad of Beverly Hills, but we'll see them grow through knowing Brandon and Brenda, I guess, right?
Well, definitely the snobs of Beverly Hills, as of for now at least, as we'll see, like, Kelly's behavior towards Brenda and the obvious of Steve's behavior towards Brandon.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe if they'd made it more of a, and I don't know if this is necessarily better, but it would feel a little bit more true to Steve if they made it more of a class thing than a race thing, maybe. Not that, that's a good look for him either, but this is just awfully unsubtle, right? It's just so he's so direct about like, well, I like basketball, but I'm going to cheer for the white guys. It's just so.
I had to like rewind like the line in my head over again to like kind of process it, but then realize like, oh, that's messed up. And
Yeah.
to JT, to your point, it would be better if like, a bully or like someone other than Steve said the line, and then Steve just like chuckled as like, the sidekick, like,
Yeah, like it'd be a little awkward. That shows like he knows it's not right, but it's his buddy, and he's kind of feels that way. Like, give him a little cover. This just felt like a little too.
This is like full blown like jerk of Steve. Like, it's like, dude, like this isn't you, and it's like, the fact that he's the one saying it just makes him even more of a bigger jerk.
Well, it's like they were sacrificing Steve like for the storyline. That's all. Like
for one episode, for your issue of the week kind of thing. And to be fair, they are gonna walk this. Well, they won't directly walk it back, but it'll like never be spoken of again. Like I can't think of any other time in the series that Steve comes off as this like
bigot.
White supremacist jock asshole. Like he's got his issues, but that tends not to be one of them.
All right, so Brandon gets his first taste as star player James is no show in a class. So he's in the robotics lab, and it's James Townsend, the star, that he's actually competing against, the other point guard. So, he's in the lab, and James, he's like, oh, I've never seen you here before. And he basically just says, whatever. And Brandon's like, well, what the fuck? Now he's starting to buy into Steve's stuff. So he goes and talks to Andrea. And I thought this was an interesting approach where Brandon is calling out the basketball player getting the beneficial treatment. And Andrea is actually defending it. And it felt like that should be the other way around, right?
A little bit.
So Andrea's like, no, we're not going to do the story. Or Brandon's like, you're going to do the story, not me, because it's a conflict of interest. And she's like, no. And he's pushing her and basically says, like, I do the same fucking thing. Like, I don't live on the district. I lie to come here. And Brandon's like, it's not the same shit. He's like, you're actually doing the fucking work. And like, these guys aren't, right? And then she even brings up the race card, which I thought felt a little out of left field when she says it to Brandon. Basically says, or it's because they're black. Basically is what she says. So I don't know.
It's like she doesn't really want to touch it because I think she doesn't know how to approach it without it turning into like a big racial issue.
Or potentially putting the light on her situation.
Right. That's what I think is the bigger problem here, is that these two both have their own very separate conflicts of interest. But it's sort of driving them. One is pushing the other to sort of pursue this story, and they're both being really cagey about it because of their own totally unrelated reasons. And she's kind of saying things like, "Oh, me write a sports story, yeah, right," and that doesn't hold a lot of water with her being like the stand-up, virtuous, serious journalist that she's supposed to be. But she does kind of lay down the law with Brandon in terms of, hello, you're talking about your conflict of interest being on the team. I'm out of district too. Like I'm glad that they sort of reminded viewers of that and didn't sort of leave that that thread out there dangling.
Yep. All right, so we have Brenda in the test drive here now, and I thought this giant sign was pretty absurd. It's like the student driver placard on top of the car. I mean, it was like the most massive placard I've ever seen stuck on the top of a car. It was gigantic.
Yeah, that was a little bit exaggerated, comical.
Yeah. So again, this whole storyline feels a little comical. Maybe it's because the other side is so heavy that they tried to go over the top, like Goofy with the other stuff, but I don't know. It feels like this whole thing is like kind of cartoonish with Brenda.
Yeah, it definitely feels like an uncomical B story.
Right. So she's in the car, and the instructor kind of blames her, but I feel like it's his fault. Like he calls out Henry Winkler, He sees Henry Winkler, and then she gets all distracted because of it. It's like, why did he even say anything? It's like he set her up to fail, and then she ends up basically failing. She fucks up, and almost got an accident. Like they kind of leave it to
I
like,
wasn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
like they kind of leave it to you to guess. I guess.
Choice.
Yeah, because like they're like and then she goes skidding. But I mean, obviously,
I thought we heard a bang too. I mean, I'd definitely look out the window if I saw the Fonz.
Right. I feel like you set her up to fail. Not cool.
Well, she was doing so well before, why you got to ruin it?
Yeah.
All right, so we go to practice or tryouts where stage dad Jim is watching. He's all in. And then when Brandon makes the cut again, he comes up to it and goes, "Oh, we're down. We are down to the final cut, right?" So he's doing the full stage dad, all in. So Andrea does some digging, and she lets Brandon know that she found out James has no transcripts, no basic testing, and no GPA. He's the only student in West Beverly without a GPA. Which was interesting because when Steve was talking, he made it seem like the whole fucking team was in on the scam. But this comes down to just this James guy, pretty much. And so we got a big story brewing right now.
Well, this turns out to be a huge fuck up on Andrea's part.
Right.
But also, what is with the school releasing potentially incriminating and very scandalous records to a student? I mean,
how do you get your hands on these records so easily?
She had to go through some source or something, right? Or dig. I don't know how the fuck she got to it.
Yeah, who did she talk to?
This is a serious crime on Andrea's part. Like, she'd get expelled for this.
I guess she's not the editor of the Blaze for nothing, but
I guess the greatest high school newspaper in the country, we're told.
But hold on, can I ask you, like, see, like, this is one of those things that, like, as you're explaining to me now, it doesn't make sense because like this is like this. I know it's a show, but this does not happen in high school. Like you can't get that close, even if you're like an editor. Like there's like that whole privacy issue. I don't know like what the privacy issues were like back in the 90s, but like there's no way.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how they're going to run this story, considering.
Andrea broke like.
It's like this is a school-sponsored newspaper. How in the world are they? It's one of those things you just sort of have to hand wave away because that's not even like the plot of this episode, even though it could be like Andrea running the story.
Plot number. I mean, like. Plot B could actually be how did Andrea get all these records?
For real.
And Brenda taking her driver's test again.
So yeah, that is what it is. So he has no records, no transcripts,
nothing. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, you would think that the what's it called, the applied learning program would would itself have a real big fucking problem with this, but apparently,
or at least falsify some shit, would create something.
Yeah, come up with some books, man. What the hell?
So then Brandon like doesn't even like Andrew's like, do you want to talk to, or do you want me to? And he's like, I'm doing it. And he gets right in James's face. James tries to apologize for the incident on the court, and he's like, "Fuck you!" Like Brandon just gets right in his grill. James goes right to the race car, and he's like, "You're doing this because I'm black, basically." And Brandon's like, "No, like you have no records. You're here illegally. You're going to take my spot on the basketball team, et cetera, et cetera." So shit gets real heated in this scene between these two guys.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, I mean, even if the school is doing something wrong, that's really not James's problem. Like it's where does Brandon get off confronting this guy about the malfeasance of the administration of West Beverly? Like, come on, he didn't create the system here. Yeah, but again, this all just goes back to Brandon wants a spot on the team. He's probably not going to get it, so he's going to take it out on who he thinks is there unfairly.
Yeah, like Brandon just comes like walking in like, oh yeah, I can just do whatever I want. It's like, bro, like you can't. And just because you want a spot, doesn't mean like you earn a spot, and you can't. Like if Brandon were to go with like the story, it's totally cheating for him to like get a spot, and it's like it could hurt more than like just any like James. It's hurt like the whole team and like the whole school and stuff too.
So back at the Walsh house, and we kind of get a little bit more of a jaded, angry Cindy that we've been seeing, because she's all dressed up, and Jim does not even compliment her. Brandon does, and she's like, "Well, at least someone fucking noticed." And Jim's just going through his fucking yearbook and all this other shit, and he's all in on the glory days. And Brandon, and he's basically like, "Well, why are you working a double tonight, Brandon? Like, you should be fucking resting because you got final tryouts tomorrow." And Brandon's like, "Well, if you want to pay for my car insurance, then I can fucking retire and just focus on basketball." And Jim says, like, "Yeah, if you make the team, we'll talk about it."
They'll
And
do it.
Cindy's like, "What the fuck?" And so a lot of tension right now between Cindy and Jim. And then
this is Jim's big mistake, I think.
You think this is the fuck up right here?
Yeah, because like it's putting like way too much this is just adding like pressure to Brandon, and like, I mean, with James and everything, it's like, oh, if I get on the team now, my dad will pay for my car insurance, I sure gotta make the team, my dad's counting on me, and my car insurance and money's counting on me too.
Yeah, I gotta figure he'd rather play basketball than work at the Peach Pit. So I can see that. Plus, yeah, the point about Cindy here looking quite fine, all duded up. This is a nice 90s fashion moment for her, I think, in that black gown going wherever the Walshes are going. I don't think we're told what their evening entails, but she's dressed to the nines.
Yeah, she's ready to go. Jim has no interest. He's more concerned about Brandon's basketball tryouts. So then we go to Brenda's on the phone with Kelly. She ended up going in the limo, I guess, to the Janet concert. It doesn't look like it. It looks like she's in a club. So I don't know if this is after the concert, I guess. I have no idea the time of all this. And she's like begging Brenda to come get her. And Brenda's like, "I can't drive." And Kelly's like, "Well, you're a good driver." And she's like, "Yeah, but I can't. I don't have a car." And then I guess I could borrow Mondale. Or a license. Yeah. And she goes to Kelly, "I guess I could borrow Mondale." And Kelly goes, "You guys have a driver?" Which I thought was actually pretty funny.
This is funny, yeah.
And then Brenda's like, "No, Walter Mondale, ran for president." And Kelly's just like staring into the fucking phone.
He's from Minnesota, and she's like, "I do not care."
Right. I don't give a fuck about any of this. So then Brenda's like, "All right, I'm going to take Mondale and go." So we kind of get bad decision Brenda at it again here, which has been a trend early as well.
Yeah, well, it's also, I feel like we've only seen Brenda, other than the shoplifting episode, which was its own thing. I think we've only really seen Brenda in B plots, right?
Right.
The show has been very Walsh focused in its early episodes, but most of that focus has really been on Brandon. We haven't gotten a good Brenda episode here in a while. And I think it's just the nature of this being the side story, the secondary story. It's just kind of what she's relegated to. But we do get, I think this is the first name drop of Mondale, the first mention of the car that has a name. So I'm sure we've seen it before, but this becomes somewhat iconic throughout these early years of the series.
Do you know Walter Mondale is, Grooney? No. Did you learn something in this episode then?
Yes.
I love it.
So Brenda driving.
Honestly, I probably learned that for the first time watching this.
Come on.
Not really. I mean, it would have been.
Well, I guess you were a little younger.
Yeah, early '90s. What did I know about?
I was super into presidents, so that's probably all I do. But
okay.
I definitely had president history books by this point.
Yeah.
All right, so Brenda's driving, and I thought this was pretty funny too. She's trying to basically positively reinforce herself as she's driving. She's like, "I'm doing a good job. I can drive. This isn't bad. I'm doing this. I'm doing that." And then we hit a mess because the car sputters in the middle of an intersection and it runs out of gas. And she starts freaking out. Of course, we're not in a cell phone era. So she walks to a gas station, finds a nice gas attendant who kind of is like, "All right, I'll help you out." And then she realizes she doesn't have any money. And he's like, "All right, let's go find the car." Fine. Of course, it's a whopping $2 worth of gas. So whatever. Yeah. Which I actually thought felt high. Because I feel like when I go now to fill up like a little gas can for my lawnmower, it's like only a couple bucks. Like, didn't that seem high by 1990 standards?
Honestly, it may be like a minimum, for the station or whatever.
Maybe.
like, to help out a stranded woman, my minimum is $2. Is sort of the impression I got. To be clear, I didn't learn about Mondale just tonight watching this episode. I was referring to the first time I watched this way back in the day.
I got that. But even then,
I don't want anyone left with the impression that I'm the total shit.
So gas was $1.15 in 1990. So this feels high. $1.15 a gallon.
$1.50. Yeah, you don't need. I mean, yeah.
I guess maybe that's a little over a gallon. So whatever. All right. So they go to the car. They go to the driver. The gas station attendant goes with her, and the car's missing. And now she's really flipping out. So we'll see what happens from there. But Mondale's gone, and she's really in the soup now.
This gas station attendant has a few lines. He has a catchphrase or whatever. He just keeps saying
stuff happens. Stuff happens.
Stuff happens. It happens. Just tell him it happens.
This guy's being the nicest gas attendant you could probably ever find.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he kind of acted like he wasn't going to be, but then he ends up being very helpful for sure.
Yeah.
So we go back to the Peach Pit where Nat's teaching Brandon about how to put mayo on a sandwich, which I thought was funny too. Basically says, whatever lettuce you want to use, who gives a shit, but mayonnaise has to be applied a certain way. Made me hungry more than anything. But then Brandon's like, look, I got to go. I got to return these books to the library, which I thought was a cover for him just trying to go home to get ready for basketball. But he really does then go to the library to return some books.
Yes, I'll just say this exchange between Brandon and Nat, it does give. I mean, it shouldn't, but I had a particular line from Nat as my quote of the episode. So we'll get to that.
Okay. So we go to the library now, and Brandon sees James, and he accosts him at the fucking library. He needs to cool off. And so they're going at it again a bit. And James is a little bit more harsh this time. He's like, look, you don't know me. My dad built this library, whatever the fuck he said, worked at the city council, something like that, right? He's worked for the city.
He's got some connections.
Here. Yeah, I basically belong here. They made me come here because my public school where I live is a disaster. Just leave me alone. I'm just trying to fucking live my life.
Yeah, and his parents wanted more for him too. Right. So, they got an opportunity.
And Brandon's trying to relate a little bit. He's like, oh, like me. You basically got forced to come here. And the guy's like, whatever the fuck, man. Just leave me alone.
He's like, no, you asshole. Not like you. I'm not rich.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not rich either. Check my bank account. And then, but the whole scene, there's this guy just shushing them in the library from behind.
Oh my God. It's amazing.
He's constantly going, shh.
Yeah,
they haven't gotten thrown out for talking too much.
This is where the overdubs and the ADR is just out of control, and I was dying laughing just at these people. This is a library, all these
guys, library.
All right, so we go back home and we find out Brenda's lied. She says the car gets stolen from the driveway. Oh, actually, I don't think she even said anything. I think they just got home and the car was missing, and she played dumb. The car's gone. They get the detective there, and Brandon comes in, and Jim's basically sorry, your car got stolen. I know you got basketball, and Brandon's just blows him up even in front of the fucking detective. Basically back the fuck off, Jim. I'm trying. I got a lot going on. All right, this is the least of my fucking worries. It means more to you than me. Back up. And I just thought it was wild that this poor detective is just sitting there while Brandon's fucking laying into his dad.
So awkward.
So Cindy is kind of being the voice of reason this time. She's like, listen, Jim, back off. He'll come around. Just let him do his own thing. Stop trying to force him into this shit because it's going to backfire. And he kind of listens. And then I thought this was funny too, because, we keep talking about Brandon being portrayed as a stud and kind of can't do anything wrong and all this other stuff. And it was just funny to me that he figures out what the detective couldn't. That Brenda, he's like, so Brenda, why didn't you hear the thieves take the car? And she immediately cracks and is like, don't tell mom, I'm sorry, and explains it. But it's the detective couldn't put that one together.
So Brandon gets home, immediately learns that his car has been quote unquote stolen. Yeah. Lights into Jim's ass over kind of nothing, but it's sort of been a mounting tension between the two of them. So you could see that blow up. on the horizon. Then he lays into Brenda because he's pieced together what really happened. I mean, Brandon's having a rough night here. After this shouting match with James in the library of his school where they're being shushed by people. It's just, man, he's I mean, we talk about Brandon having these sort of self-righteous moments and these confrontations with people. This is like something right out of Curb, I feel like, where it's just one thing after another.
Yeah, he is struggling tonight. It's just really kind of, and all of it is coming down to him feeling the pressure, trying to make this team, but perceiving perhaps as a bigger issue that may prevent him.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Brenda basically admits it. She apologizes. Don't tell mom. I'll do whatever you need. And then she has this weird like realization that she was bad at driving because as a kid, her friend's mom got to a big accident. It was like at a body cast.
Uh-huh.
And then she gets one of the most like self high five, like backdoor compliments of all time. That's why I'm great at everything except driving.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, that felt a little strong.
Have
Lord.
we seen Brenda great at anything else? I mean, I feel like we have seen like her be great at something the first time around.
Maybe the English stuff that one episode.
Yeah, like her
that.
brother, she's a great writer.
Yeah.
She's also a hero because she saved the girl on the beach.
That's right.
By proxy. So yeah, I mean, academically, she's supposed to be pretty strong. But Brandon immediately dismisses this as like, that was 100 years ago, Brenda. No one gives a shit anymore. It's real Larry David energy from Brandon in this episode.
He's like, get over it. Like, whatever the fuck. Who cares? 10 years ago. Just fucking drive the car.
Completely.
So we go from there. We get a very poignant scene where Brandon and James bond on the basketball court. James is kind of like, whatever, it's a free country. They start shooting, and I actually like the way they did this. It was like quiet for like a few minutes. They were just shooting hoops, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like kind of how guys come together, right? And then they finally kind of crack the ice, and Brandon apologizes, and he kind of says like, look, I get it, like, and whatever. They kind of come together, and then admit that they're each other's competition, and only one of them is probably going to make the team. And so I liked the scene a lot. I actually thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I kind of did too. Well, and I kind of like that the way this all came together with there really was no story with this whole applied learning program. Like I thought it was going to be this big scandal that they exposed, and it was like it was going to end up being not so much Brandon learning the lesson, but these, basketball players from out of district or getting kickbacks learning, well, there's no shortcuts in life. You have to do it. And it just wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. So, I mean, for a show that often has a dodgy history of, race relations, race issues, when it does tackle that topic, I kind of thought this came together nicely.
It almost felt like, though, they got into it and then realized maybe like the real path was too big for this right now.
Yeah, could be.
Going down, like them actually running a scheme and this whole thing and him blowing it up. Like it almost felt like they started to go that route and was like, we're not quite there yet. So they pivoted a bit, which again, I think is almost in an interesting way. It's this less hackneyed, not hackneyed, but less formulaic. You know what I mean? Like it actually, like you said, it was almost a surprise. Like I don't know, Bruni, did you like the scene in the gym?
Yeah, I did. It's like it's like Brandon's moment of realization that it's like this has nothing to do with race or like where it comes from. It's like you and I, we're gonna do our best and we're gonna see who makes the team and who doesn't. And they both show respect for each other. James respects Brandon for what type Brandon athlete is, and it's vice versa. And for a show that is about exposure a lot of the time, they throttle back on exposing the program, and they just like let it be like, oh, like, now it's not even about like, the program and like what they do. It's like where James is coming from.
Yeah, you're right. They don't demonize this program, which is
Mm-hmm.
presented as doing a pretty good thing for the
Right.
school and for the community. And I mean, we don't really see much
It's not
of
like
it, but
it's top priority.
yeah, it's like, and Andrea investigates it, and it sort of started to initially present them in a bad light, but
Well,
it
that's the one
turns
thing
out,
though. We don't figure out why there's no GPA. Like, I wish they kind of
well,
closed that
I
loop at
think we
least.
kind of did though. I think the answer was Andrea was just a big fucking dumbass and didn't ask the follow-up question.
Okay, so you think it's
Is
just
he
that
even
she was
part?
wrong,
Yeah, is he even part of this applied learning program? Well, no, he's just enrolled through,
but he still has no GPA.
Yeah, I
not
don't get that
according to
part
them,
either.
but I think that's
Right.
because they were just going through their records. They weren't looking at
Okay.
the larger, just regular student body. You know what I
Well, I
mean?
think
Like,
that what screws it up is she said something like he's the only student in the school without a
she made
GPA.
it seem like that. Yeah, she did say something like that, didn't she?
Like,
But
maybe
like you said, it's a good chance she
transcripts
just screwed it
didn't
up.
come in yet. I don't know.
But it's like
Because
that can't possibly be true because he said that he had a parent who just, the reason he was there is he had connections through a parent. He was not part. He told Brandon he's not part of this
right, he's like, I don't even
applied
know what you're
learning.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just there enrolled as a regular student like Brandon is. And yeah, he's out of district, but exceptions are made sometimes.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, like they just got their signal crossed or Andrea just sucked or what. Like it just there was nothing there at the end of the day. Like it seemed like it was a big mix up, right?
Yeah.
So Brandon's out walking around on the campus. The other basketball players kind of stink eye him for a second, but it's kind of played as like a joke. And then they're like, hey, we'll see you soon, Brandon. Like, whatever. Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
And Steve's still kind of coming hard late in the game. Like, don't worry about them. This is our school, not theirs. So it almost feels like they're setting up for like future conflict with Steve and these guys or something.
Which doesn't amount to anything. So I don't know what this was.
It was odd. It definitely seemed like it was going to be a school ties conflict or something. I don't know. It felt a little much.
Go.
So Brandon makes JV because James makes varsity. So Brandon gets the JV slot, and Jim's proud. He's like, hey, you know what? You get the playing time, and then he admits, like, look, I was a bench warmer, and I only got that shot because everyone else fouled out.
Yeah.
And I got lucky,
Yep, and I got lucky.
So I thought that was a good wrap to that. And Brandon's still going to play ball. He'll be on JV, and maybe he'll move up. And then
we're never going to see him play basketball again.
No, he does. For the school.
Does he?
But yeah, well, isn't that they do like a 3-on-3 tournament or something?
Yeah, I guess recreationally there's
something.
But I mean, he's still going to work at the Peach Pit. So like, was Jim? Hey, you got salty. He got salty with me. The deal is off. Like JV isn't good enough yet to make varsity.
Yeah, that's kind of a forgotten. Or maybe Cindy put the kibosh on it.
Could be. Yeah.
So we wrap up. Mondale saved. The detective finds it, and I thought it was a good wrap up. I thought this was a pretty funny ending. Again, I think they tried to keep this story light because the other stuff was so heavy, and I thought overall they did a pretty good job doing that. So the detective basically says, "Hey, it's the crazy." And again, this detective is played as real stupid because he's like, "Hey, I can't believe it. The perps left the car in the middle of an intersection, and our tow truck took it. And guess what? The keys were right in the ignition.
Keys are in the ignition."
Like, didn't he say earlier they hotwired it? Or I guess or that was the gas attendant who said it. I don't know. Someone said that maybe they hotwired it, and then the keys have Brenda's keychain, and we kind of end on the, Woody Woodpecker kind of, we got it from Brenda. When Sydney's like, it's hey, that's Brenda's keychain. Yeah.
Don't know how that got there.
That's so Brenda, right? Like, that's kind of how we wrap up.
Yeah.
And so that's that. So I thought this was a good episode. Had some drama, had some laughs. It chugged along. No Dylan tonight, so that always hurts. But I don't think he would have fit in this one. Like, I don't. I thought he maybe was going to pop up in the science lab or in the computer lab when they were in there. In that one scene, I thought Brandon was going to be asking him about it, maybe because he kind of is like the insider of the school, knows what's going on. But I thought
Yeah.
it's a pretty good character development, but it wasn't hammered home. So I really like this episode. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was gonna.
Given the subject matter, I definitely enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to, and definitely more than I remembered also. So I was pretty pleased coming out of this too.
All right, so let's get to our awards. Well, Grooney, any final wrap up thoughts on the episode before we get to
I thought it was a good episode, and to like what you say about Dylan is that like Dylan could have probably have said, "I've never seen that kid in the
right?
lab here, like ever." You know, Dylan could have been maybe like a side like, "Oh, I've never seen him either." You know, like fit Dylan in somewhere. But it's good that like Dylan's not here, but like you could have fit him in like a side character role here.
All right, so let's do our awards for this episode before we wrap things up. So best scene, I went with a little bit of a cheat, but I thought they were both equally good. It's Brandon confronting James in the campus and then at the library. I thought those are both well done.
I said the library, just because it really did give us some answers, and was not afraid to present Brandon in not the most sympathetic light. And also all the people yelling at them was really funny to me.
And I did like the basketball scene too. So all three of those were really good. Grinny, what'd you think?
Yeah, the best scene is definitely in the library where James tells his story and where he comes from and how he's trying to get along, get in line like everyone else is.
All right, for the most important scene, I kind of stuck with that as well. I just had James kind of laying the smack back on Brandon. So again, it's kind of both scenes, but I thought those are the most important. To Tim, you really nailed a good point. Like we're showing that we're not afraid to portray Brandon with some potential issues, maybe jealousy or whatever else. But and we saw that last episode too, right? His jealousy started creeping in. So that seems to be maybe one of his big flaws. And James kind of hands it back to him. So I thought, again, the most important scenes were where James was just kind of dishing some reality to Brandon.
Oddly enough, I went with Kelly flirting with Brandon when she spies on him in his room. It's a very small scene. It's not important to this episode at all, but in terms of just being sort of foundational to the series, I always think of this category almost as best foreshadowing in some ways.
Yep.
And that is, I mean, I think we've called it out before between the two of them, but really front and center. Like if you did a montage of early Brandon Kelly interactions where they're, teasing a romance, this would have to make the list.
Right. Granny, what's your most important scene?
Well, I actually went in a different direction, but I really liked the scene and I thought it was important. Jim and Cindy talking about how Jim needs to back off and let Brandon be his own man and make room for Brandon to succeed, but as well as fail. So I give props to Cindy for putting Jim in his place. Let it go,
Right.
That is a good scene.
It's up for Brandon to figure out on his own and what he wants, not what you want. So big ups to Sydney overall in this episode.
She made some strides, as we'll get to our character ranking in a bit.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, most 90s look. I didn't think there was a ton. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting desensitized to the clothes a little bit now, but because they're all kind of 90s-ish. But David kind of had a glaring one at one point, and then I went with Andrea's the dress shirt with the tie. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, her Prohibition era mobster suit in her first scene. Yes. There's that. There's also Steve has this. I think it's when he's talking to David. He has this seafoam green, it looks like a silk button-up shirt with random dots and patterns all over it. It looked very comfortable, but it's also very 1990.
I went with because I just think that they were the hottest team at the time besides the Bulls and stuff. Steve's Laker t-shirt or Scott's Laker gear, just because it's the Lakers and it's Magic Johnson, the Lakers, and the Lakers were really hot in 1990. So I went with Steve's outfit, gym outfit.
And I kind of went with that same idea for the most 90s moment was Brandon reenacting those Lakers teams in his room. Like that was a very 90s thing to do, to have the Nerf hoop and the little ball, and you're kind of throwing around and pretending you're Magic Johnson and, you know, James Worthy and whoever else you were saying. So that was a very 90s moment to me. Just the teenage kid in his room playing basketball on the little Nerf hoop.
True. I went with Brenda running out of gas and having to huff it to the nearest gas station. You know, no cell phones or anything. Just felt like a very 90s thing to happen.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I actually went with, but I think I might change mine to like what Justin said. I went with driving in an empty parking lot, but I feel like people do that now. But I feel like, you know, like it always seemed like, you know, that was like a 90s thing. Like people like going into like empty parking lots where there are no cars around. But like everybody was being like he gives it to Grooney. Grooney shoots. He scores. You know, like everyone was like going in their room thinking that they're like the best like basketball player in their room. You know, so I'm gonna go with JT on that one and say that Brandon doing the calls like in his room and making the baskets. You know, just fooling around is like the most 90s moment.
I'm not gonna lie. I did sort of wonder if driver's ed through your high school is like still a thing. Like I have no idea. I assume it is.
It was when it did offer it, like, you know, I didn't take it, but like, I mean, it was there. Like, you know, I guess you would like sit in the class like for like a little bit and then like go on the road. Like the card was there.
It was mandatory for us.
See, I didn't take it through the school. I think I had to go to like one class. It was like on a weekend or something. But my actual like driving instructor and all that was just like a private owned thing. But I didn't go to public school either, so maybe that's why.
Right. I was gonna say at the public school I went to, it was actually through your gym class. It was the health portion.
Got it.
So I don't know if you guys had like health and gym sort of split.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So it was the health portion of gym class. My sophomore year was driver's ed, and you didn't have to take behind the wheel, but if you chose to take behind the wheel, you could do it through the school. And literally, it was the gym teacher who was your driving instructor. And
interesting.
it was just a week. I think it was a week or 2 weeks of behind the wheel, and you were done. So, unless you failed. So, but yeah.
Right. Best lesson learned, I went with Steve's blatant stereotyping leading to all these issues that basically sparked the whole episode.
There's a lot of lessons learned here, you guys. I went with, I'll just go down the list. Don't jump to conclusions about people based on race or circumstance. Also, you need to consider your own vested interests before you go hurling accusations at someone. On a lighter note, perhaps check the gas gauge before driving all night to Doheny and Melrose. And finally, this is also my quote of the episode. I'll just say, with mayonnaise, you guys, you can't be too specific.
That's a good one. That was a good quote and a good life lesson as well. I also had noted originally like the Bobby Knight platitudes that Jim dumped on Brandon.
Oh yeah,
for reading his book. I had those.
That
marked
Kelly
down,
rolls her eyes at. Yeah.
Yes, until we get the Steve stuff. Jimmy, what'd you have for the lesson learned?
Yeah, like I feel like I just went the easy way. Like, don't judge a book by its cover, because Brandon obviously doesn't know where James is coming from, and like I guess you could say like know who Mondale is.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Your presidential history.
The actual lesson. All right, best hookup. I went with Jim Walsh himself. I thought he was a lot of self-love in this one. He was into his fucking yearbook, into his big moment in the basketball court. Just very, very, it's a Jim love fest.
Jim Walsh and his high school memories. Yeah, I think I'll back you on that for lack of any other hookups here.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't really find a hookup to like, or like even like really think of one, so I went with no hookup.
All right, best quote. I had a few, and one was not the mayonnaise one, which that was a good one, Tim. But I had aren't you a little short? That was Andrea. Us Irish guys have to stick together, Steve. Andrea had a savage. She was pretty savage in this episode. She goes, Steve Sanders is a spoiled slug who doesn't even come close to being a credible.
Good one.
Cindy had a good one. She goes, time flies and you're double dribbling down memory lane. Just fucking bitter about Jim not complimenting her. And then the last one I had was Brandon. Why would anyone in Beverly Hills want to steal a 78 bomber? That was a funny line when he realizes his car gets stolen. Grooney, what'd you have for best quotes?
Well, like I only went with one because like it really stuck out to me. Like life moves pretty fast when you're double dribbling down memory lane.
There you go.
Mm.
And then Tim, you have the mayonnaise one. Anything else?
With mayonnaise, you can't be too specific. Are you too specific, Rooney, with mayonnaise?
No, I don't think so.
All right, final grade out of 10. Like I said, I think I said it off air. This was my favorite episode to date, and it's a big bump. So last episode, Tim, I went 3.5 out of 10. We were down on that one.
Yeah.
But I went actually 6 out of 10 on this one. So I had a couple 5.5s early on, a 5, and this is my highest score so far. I thought it was a tighter episode. We didn't have as much kind of fluff. Yes, it was lacking Dylan. Yes, I didn't care for the portrayal of Steve, but I thought this is the best Cindy looked. We're getting some more like fleshing out of Jim. I thought the Brandon storyline was well done, especially with the way they played it out. I thought they did an overall pretty good job of keeping the Brenda stuff light to trade off of it, and it didn't throw too much at us, but it gave us some good character development flowing throughout it.
6 feels good. 6 feels like a good rating for this one for me too. Everything you said, plus they zigged when I thought they were going to zag. As far as just some of those lessons were not quite as like ham-fisted as I thought they were going to be. Mm-hmm. And I thought this made some sort of bold but also good choices. So I was pretty on board with this at the end of the day.
Believe it or not, I went with a 6 as well. And I thought it was a very good, like, standard, but like, good character development, but, standard, like, oh, well, you don't know the whole truth story. So then Brandon was going to, like, stop at nothing to get to the truth until James finally, like, breaks in and says, well, you don't know me and this and that. So that was your standard, don't judge a book by its cover episode. But very good character development, and big ups to Cindy in this episode.
All right, let's really quickly hit our trackers. So here are the songs we didn't hear tonight because, of course, the music is dubbed on these, courtesy of Tune Find. We had Oops Up by Snap. That is when Brandon and Jim are shooting hoops. Turn It On Salvador by Toy Matinee is when Brenda and Kelly are hanging out in her room. The Way You Do Things You Do by The Temptations. That's when Brandon and James meet up at the Peach Pit. And Just the Way It Is, Baby by the Rembrandts is when Kelly calls Brenda from the club to come pick her up. Tim, you want to give a quick plug to our favorite Instagram?
Our favorite Instagram is BH90210 Restored, and you can find these original music clips on that Instagram account. Go back to the very bottom there for the season 1 scenes here that we talked about, but it's funny to me when you go on these websites like TuneFind, which is a good resource for what were the original songs that we're not hearing. They'll have a comment section, and you'll see people asking things like, what was the song during this scene? It has lyrics like whatever, and someone will reply with what the original song was, and they go, no, that's not it. And it's because there's an entire generation now of people who are watching this show for the first time, and they're only getting, the dubbed version. So they're like, what are those songs? And they're like, well, they're not even real songs. They're the cheap licensed music they could afford that, you can never find what those songs are because they're just not, commercially available. But it's almost like this topsy-turvy world now where people have gotten attached to the replacement songs because they don't know any better. It kind of blows my mind. But yeah, that's the world we live in. But you can find these scenes and these songs as they were originally presented on BH 90210 Restored on Instagram.
All right, here's our character updates. We added Coach Riley, which I feel like that's always wasn't that the Grooney? Wasn't that the Mighty Ducks bad guy coach?
It was, yep.
Go-to name. We had James Townsend, the point guard. We had the driver's ed teacher. We had the gas station attendant, and then we had the detective. So we're gonna call him Detective Clodumbo because not on.
Like that.
I would say that the driving teacher also seemed very very familiar, like character. I mean, actor.
All right, relationships. I went with James and Brandon. They kind of bonded on the basketball court and built a little friendship there, a little rivalry.
Yeah.
And
I like the James character too. I know he's one of those one and done characters, but he's one I wouldn't mind seeing again.
Yeah, he would have been good if he stuck around and kind of popped in now and then.
Yeah.
And places and things, I added the basketball court, I guess the school court, and then Mondale was our first, like you said, debut officially at Mondale.
Good one, yeah.
Okay, so Grooney, obviously listened before. So what we do now is we do a character ranking of where we stand with all the main characters, and we try and do this as a blend of kind of where they've been for the series, but also this episode. So
yeah,
I don't discredit one bad performance or missing, like so Dylan wasn't here, but yeah. I kept him number one still on my rankings. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to ding him too much just for one missing episode.
Yeah, Dylan's number one.
All right, so I had Brandon 2, Brenda 3 still.
Yes. And we might as well say Donna's still dead last.
Yes. 100%. And I had Scott with
just
her.
above her. Yeah.
All right, so then after our top three, Dylan, Brandon, Brenda, I still have Jim 4, but I moved Cindy up to 5, which is a pretty little bit of a bump up for me. I moved her ahead of Steve. I thought she was really good this episode. I thought Steve, I try to give leeway. He didn't do much last week, and then this was kind of a down episode for him.
Right, totally absent last week, and bad look for him this week. So yeah, I think you got to be a little bit bearish on Steve now.
I mean, yeah, like me personally, I almost want to put Cindy ahead of Jim, but again, like Jim just gets like, that spot because of like what he was saying in last episode, like go for it, son,
Yeah,
so.
And Cindy was kind of annoying in last episode. Yeah, we didn't really care for
it. But if vice versa itself this time, where it's like Cindy's like the saving grace and Jim's like, no, I mean, kind of the annoying one, would you say, JT?
Jim, yeah, a little bit. But he wasn't as annoying as Cindy was.
No, didn't compare to, Jim's kind of been climbing, and I think that really continues in this episode. Cindy has been, I guess, holding her own. She took a hit last week.
But she made up for it this time.
She kind of regained some ground. So I don't really mind them being neck and neck like that. So that seems appropriate.
Okay, then I kept David there, but I feel like we're maybe one episode away from moving David ahead of Steve, which I wouldn't have believed a few weeks ago, but it's starting to feel that way to me.
Yeah,
I know.
Steve really dug himself down this episode. Like we're seeing like a really like bad version of Steve.
That could change though, honestly. And you give me one good Steve episode, maybe it's on the horizon, and that could turn around pretty easily. Or another good David episode could really see him on the ascent.
Okay, and then I just had Andrea, who I actually moved ahead of Kelly in this episode, because I thought she was pretty good. And then I had Kelly and then Nat.
I think that's Andrea ahead of Kelly, who Kelly hadn't had much going on lately, has she?
No, this one, at least we had the Brandon stuff in this one, so that was something, but...
Yeah, it's something.
Kelly's, like, being, like, really a snob in this episode. Like, she's getting Brenda into trouble, though, but Brenda's too manipulative to, like, she's being manipulative into doing bad things. So, like,
right.
Kelly's definitely, like, snobby and bad in this episode.
Yep. Not a good look for her either. So.
But like Andrea's like a little too nosy in this. I mean, well, it's her job to be nosy. Like, I don't think she was way too out of line in this episode. Although going through someone's records is really wrong.
I mean, it's kind of fucked up.
Well, she's an investigative reporter, though.
She's a serious journalist.
Yeah.
What can you do?
Where are these violations? Where are these privacy laws?
Here's our overall ranking then. So Brandon is still in first place with 55 points. Brenda still in second with 46, but she is barely hanging on now. I'm sorry, actually, she's got 47. No, 46. So she's barely hanging on. Who Dylan was not even in this episode, picked up 12 points. So he's at 45. So he's one behind Brenda now overall and gaining. Steve in fourth with 40. He stays there. Actually, he moved behind Dylan. He was in third before, so they flip. Cindy moves up with 37 points, just above David with 35. And then we got Jim coming in at 27 points, so he's making a push. Kelly at 25, Andre at 23, Scott at 14, Nat at 7, and Donna at 5. One per episode so far for Donna Martin, who's in last place.
Jeez, yeah.
But I don't feel like we've even been harsh on that because
we haven't.
Really even been on. I mean,
it's been nothing. They've given us nothing. Yeah. All
right. Great episode, guys. Really quickly before we wrap, just want to plug everything we have going on here at the North South Connection. If you're into, if you're into champagne or anything else, we have it across the board for you. Wrestling, pop culture. You can northsouthconnection.podbean.com. Like I mentioned off the top, if you're into Beverly Hills 90210, either as a novice or as a diehard and you want to join us, just reach out and we'd love to have you on the episode. Also, for you pop culture fans, newest episode of have you heard about Pluto over on the Jenny position, one of our sister feeds? Jennifer Smith, who was a guest here before, had myself and my bro, Jeff Machado, on, and we watched an episode of Jersey Shore Family Vacation, and that just dropped. So if you're into Jersey Shore or you want to hear more of me, Jeff doesn't do a ton of podcasts outside of the one him and I occasionally do. Definitely check that out because it was a lot of fun and digging into that. And Jeff is a big shore head like I am, so that is a must listen. Grueny, anything you want to talk about quick before we wrap up?
Yes, over on the Place to Be Wrestling feed, you can catch me and Michael Cook on our podcast called Extreme Resurrection. We're moving through September of 2006, where ECW is still relying on superstars from SmackDown to come make the show worthwhile, because ECW on Sci-Fi is not going to survive on its own. And that's all I have to plug for Extreme Resurrection.
All right, Tim?
I would just say if you're a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and you like what JT and I do on this show, we also do an MCU-related podcast. So it's myself, JT, the aforementioned Jennifer Smith, and Scott Criscolo. This is called The Journey Through Infinity, going chronologically through all the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Had an episode just drop on covering Spider-Man Homecoming, and this was actually run, I believe, right here on the North-South Connection.
Yes, special crossover.
Yeah, special crossover. So the normal home of this podcast is the Jenny position, our sister network, but went ahead and dropped that one right here on NoSo. So check that out if you're so inclined, and we will have more installments of that series as we continue the journey. You can find me as well on Twitter. I am at Syke68, CYKE68. Chat me up about 90210, MCU, whatever's on your mind. I think we're getting some pretty good engagement on this podcast, and really appreciate all your thoughts, questions, resources that you're sharing as well. We've gotten some pretty fun feedback, so keep them coming.
And we will continue this journey in a few weeks, as usual. Drop every 3 weeks or so. We try and keep up with that. I'm at JT the Pod Guy on Twitter. Again, northsouthconnection.podbean.com. You can have a little den some. We'll talk to you soon. Everyone take care.